And Chris, I'll let you admit those folks as they're with us today to let those in. So see the first poll results that I have. We are about, let's call it 80-20, 22% have opened some type of polling, and about 78%, 80% of you are not open yet there. And if you're just joining us, would ask that we're going to put everybody on mute there. We will have ample opportunity for folks to ask questions. We do have a large group today, which is great. And we have some questions that have already been submitted. But if you have a specific question, we're going to make sure we make time today to do that. So I'm going to very quickly do a little share screen here. I've got just a couple of opening slides. This works well. Off to the races there. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to our first session there. This is our BPA Managed States webinar. And if you are new to Zoom, I know some of you are old timers with this, but if you're new to Zoom, we would ask that you put yourself on mute, and you can do that in the lower left-hand section there. We also are in the chat section if you want to say hi to someone you recognize down in the bottom, or you can submit a question. We've got a couple of members of our team that are gathering questions. And again, I already have some as well. And you're with us today as part of our Managed States group as we try to help prepare and make sure that you folks are ready to go because 80% of you have not opened yet and are getting ready to take that step. And I would imagine even within the 20% that are, you're probably still in the early stages of doing that. So today, we are very fortunate to have a guest with us. We've got Mr. Robert Winkler. He is the Director of Operations with a chain of bowling centers called Stars and Strikes. They operate currently 16 locations, primarily in the Southeast in Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama. And if you've been following this pandemic at all, you know that Georgia was really the tip of the spear and the first group of centers in the country to open. And we're very fortunate to have Robert today with us. So he has been operating locations for about 30 days now, has a few that have just opened in the last few days, and like some of you, has a few that aren't open yet. So really has a very unique perspective to carve out some time and share with you there. And prior to joining the Stars and Strikes group, Robert had a long and very successful career with the Brunswick Group, Brunswick Recreation Centers, ran bowling centers throughout the Southeast, the Denver area, multi-unit manager, has a long list of accolades and one of the top operators that I've ever had the pleasure of knowing there. And we are very, very appreciative that while his centers are open and he's trying to take care of his guests in this new environment, that he carved out some time for us to hang out with us there. So I'm going to stop the share. And Robert, first of all, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, our pleasure. So if you'd like, if you're new to Zoom, in the top right-hand corner there, you'll see where you can click on speaker view, or there's a grid view. If you want to click on the speaker view, you'll be able to hear Robert as we go through our questions. And again, down at the bottom, there is a chat function that you can click on that, and you can send a message to everybody, or you can send a message to somebody if you want to say hi there. So we'll have some opportunity there. But because we have such a large group, I wanted to make sure that we had a few questions in advance to cover this. So the first thing we're going to talk about is this idea of reopening. And so we'll get to leagues. I know it's a very important part for many of you. But a lot of our questions started out with this whole reopening. So, Robert, you are in a very unique position that you've been able to actually go through this and operate centers for 30 days now. But before you actually open, tell us a little bit about the training and the steps that you took to make sure that your center and centers were ready to reopen.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and I will caveat this with saying that by no means do we think we know everything about this subject. In candor, we were learning right as you all are, and as the country is learning, we were changing, we're developing, we're changing even some of our processes we rolled out. But, basically the way we decided to start was when the governor kind of surprised us and said, hey, you can open, we had to soul search a little and say, we're not quite ready. It was the great unknown. To be honest, this is being first is sometimes good, but sometimes it's not. And we felt that it was more important to really take our time, really think about what we were going to do and how we were going to operate in the parameters that we were given by the governor's guidelines, and really how Stars and Stripes could execute it, because it was more important for us to get it right than it was to get it fast, because we knew for sure if we didn't do a good job with this, not only was the representation of our brand at stake, the industry, which you are all part of, was at stake, and the world as a whole was watching. So there's some pressure out there to really think about it and really diagnose what is it going to be. So we decided that we would look into it. We developed 3 different processes for our individual business groups, one for front of house, back of house, one for bowling, one for arcade. I was involved in the development of that along with some other folks in the company. But then we decided that once we had flushed those out and really kind of tried to execute them actually, then we developed our final plan that we were moving forward with. We brought all of our salaried managers that were on payroll at the time into one of our stores in Atlanta, and we ran them through a training session for each of the business groups to really let them see it live, let them feel what this looks like, put the mask on and try this, because I would just say one thing: if you haven't tried the mask out yet, you're going to need to, because it's different. You got to speak your voice. You got to find your outside voice. If you're a soft talker, you've got to really understand how it kind of prohibits you in some ways. It's hot. These are tough shifts. But basically, as far as the training went, we decided bring everybody in, give them hands-on training, have them take it back to their teams at their locations and prepare to roll it out. So it was the great unknown initially. We developed a plan that we felt comfortable with to move ahead, and we trained our team members and then opened up, I think, 2 weeks after we could have initially.
No, that's good. I like that you used the term, you wanted to do it right versus fast. And if any of you have been on our calls previously with our managed states, as we've talked about, the reopening resource center and things we have available, we've been very cautious to say, it's a very personal decision on when you're going to open up. And whenever you decide, guess what? You're right. If you decide to open up in day 1, or you decide to wait a week or a weekend, there is no right answer. The answer is the one that is best for your family, your team members, your staff, and the community that you serve there. So, and everybody looks through a different lens, and everybody has a different business scenario. So I love the fact that your group chose to focus, right versus fast. Let me ask you, because you've had centers that have opened up in other states following that. Did you take that approach in those states as well, or what happened in the latter states?
Well, what was interesting is when we first planned to open, we were really going full out with this. We actually had plans that the government would only allow us to have a certain number of people in our building at a time, and we were monitoring that. So we were training to have somebody at the door. If you've been to a Home Depot, you've seen the person there with the checker, and they're only letting a certain number in the building at a time, and somebody's at the exit. We adopted that as a plan. We left that initially after the first weekend because the volume wasn't even there to worry about counting people coming in. We had actually put stanchions along the entire arcade and had one entry point where we were going to, again, have a counter there and count the number of people. Since we limited the arcade to every other PlayStation, we wanted to limit the capacity in there as well. And so we had a plan for that. We eliminated that very quickly. So some of the things early on that we learned in our Georgia opening, we tailored back. And as we opened Tennessee, we did it a little differently. So we're adapting as we go.
It's interesting you mentioned about the mask, because I can tell you as a consumer myself, and it's not a bowling thing, if I go to the pharmacy or I go to the grocery store, I go to Home Depot, I have a hard time hearing them when they talk with the mask. And so it's a very favorable experience. So it's interesting that you, from a team member standpoint, said, hey, I got to find my outside voice, because while I had some sympathy for the young lady or the young man that was behind the register, quite candidly, I didn't know what the hell they were saying, and made for a very good experience. So it's funny that you brought that up, and it's one of the things you had to have people find their outside voice.
It is true, because the reality is we trained with, we have to train how to use these masks and be efficient. And when you think about our bowling locations, you've got noise of bowling, you've got the music, you've got the video games. So now you're adding another distraction to the actual conversation. Some of the soft-spoken ones in our group are literally having to, in their mind, they're screaming. But as the guest hears it, it's just a normal conversation.
So let's talk a second about staffing, because we had a lot of questions about staffing, and I've heard some folks say that because of certain government decisions on unemployment, making more than I would if I was working, has kept people from coming back. And some folks have said, no, I've had a few folks that didn't want to come back because they just didn't feel comfortable. What's been your experience with bringing back the team and getting back in, back to work?
Well, I'd say all the above. There is a truth to the fact that your servers and bartenders are probably making more money now if they're receiving the unemployment and the additional funds there than they would be if they were working in the store. The volumes are down. Their tips are going to be down. There's a reality that some of them are making more than they would have if they were working. So initially in our conversations with our team, one of the strategies we adopted early on in the shutdown was we would continuously talk with them. We call the team members once every couple of weeks just to see how they're doing. It let us into their life a little bit to let them know, one, we cared, because we did, but also if somebody was in a hard time or needed some help, we would try to provide that for them. But also let us know from a perspective, some of them were not able to get qualified for unemployment for whatever reason, and that's out of my hands. But the bottom line is it gave us a nod. If we had two team members that we would consider both A's and one was on unemployment and happy and one was not, then when it came time to call that position back, we knew where we were going to start. And that would not only help us as a location, but it would help that individual and their families to have some income. So that barrier is still there, but as we wind that down here in the next month or so, I think we're going to start seeing a little different perspective. But initially, we just asked, hey, are you ready to come back? If we're ready, if we get to open tomorrow, would you be ready to come back? And at the stage that we started this, we were willing to go either way. Somebody said yes or no. If they said no, I'd rather you not bring me back right now. I want to come back, but I'm really making pretty good money on unemployment. I'd kind of like to stay home if it's okay. At the certain stages when we did that, that was fine. And now that we're a month in, our business levels are ramping up. We're starting to have to bring back more hourly team members to help cover shifts, provide a guest experience that we're looking for. We're at the point now where we're going to have to make some tough decisions and say, look, now's the time. If you don't come back now, then we as a company are going to accept your resignation and move on. So it's not like we want to be mean or play hardball or anything like that. We have a business to run, and right now some of them are enjoying the spoils of certain benefits that aren't going to continue. There are those that are willing to come back immediately, and we would bring them back first if we can, if they're qualified for a position or if they can benefit a location or two by bringing them back. But the one criteria we made sure of is if we're going to call back an hourly team member off unemployment, they can still receive partial unemployment in Georgia. I'm not sure every state's that way, but if you don't make more than a certain dollar figure, you can not only make the money for working, but also get unemployment compensation. So we would try to keep that thought first. And then secondly, if we were going to have enough hours above that, if there were going to be full-time hours for that person, then we would definitely ask them for that. So that's kind of the basis we used. We touched base, see where they wanted to go, if they could come back one or wanted to, based on our needs. Now we're at the point of having to make some tougher decisions where, some of our teammates are going to make decisions to go somewhere else. It just happens. Some are going to want to ride out whatever length of time they have for the compensation from the unemployment, and that's their choice as well. But for us, we're going to operate the business. We're moving forward, and we hope to bring most of them along.
So just on a percentage basis, when you open back up in that first week or two, what percentage of your people did you have working? I mean, obviously it wasn't 100%. But.
In candor, the first weekend we were open, it was full salaried managers. That's all we had on duty. We did have some full-time equivalents that we considered, but in general, myself, I'm working in a store, I'm right there with them. So our payroll, if you will, was already covered because of the salary. When there were shortfalls in management coverage, then we would bring some full-time equivalents back. So the reality of a percentage part, I don't know what that would be, but just generally speaking, our first weekend was just the salaried team members.
Okay. Good. So you've had a few locations been open a few weeks now, and it seems like as centers are opening up, they have kind of what I would call these strict protocols of things they were going to do. Not that they were good or bad, but they were just strict and different. Now that you've had some of your locations open for a few weeks, have you been able to relax any of those, or are you still moving forward with the protocols as you reopen?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, we're adapting as some of the guidelines change. We adapt to those. We made some internal choices at Stars and Strikes, which again, I'm not saying we're right and that's the way you should do it, but our initial plan was when we opened, any food item was going to be in a to-go container. We were going to use the packet ketchups and mustards. We were going to have everything in a plastic cup. We were going to have a limited menu, and it was going to be a one-time use paper menu, and we threw it away. So anything that was purchased from a guest as far as food and beverage went, it went in the trash if they left it behind. We've since changed that plan. Initially, first phase of the change was we were going to ask the guests, would you like to have that in a to-go container or on regular plateware? And let the guests choose. Now we're at the point where we're just serving it as we would have done in the past. But if they request a to-go container, then we provide that. But outside of that, we took definite bigger steps to put it in a to-go container, have a sealed sticker on it, sign and date the sticker with what was in it and who prepared it. And it was actually kind of cool in the sense of the vessel serving it to the guest, very consistent, but frankly, quite expensive as you lay that over the course of now 14, 15 locations. So our decision has been made based on guest feedback too, to be candid, because some of them look at you like you have three heads when you bring it in as a go thing, because they said, I'm not leaving. Well, yeah, you're right, but this is our protocol right now. So that's just one example of some things we have pulled back. Initially with the house ball cleaning, we were removing every house ball from the ball return, cleaning it, cleaning the ball return, putting it back. Now we're still cleaning the house balls, but we're leaving them on the return itself. So relax, if you want to call that relaxing it, a little bit there. In the arcade, one of the interesting things that we picked up from one of our competitors is we had initially turned off every other swiper to get the social distancing and create the limited capacity. We've learned from one of our competitors that every single swiper's on, but there's signage on the games like the drivers that say, please only play this with your group. So not shutting off half of our revenue opportunities was something that we learned, because we were definitely having to make some hard decisions on games. So now all games are on, but there's signage within the arcade that says, just please play this with only your group. And that's been very well received by the guests.
You mentioned the rental shoes. I want to talk about that a second, because that's not the bowling ball. Excuse me. I mean, we've been sanitizing shoes forever, as long as any of us have been in this business. But this bowling ball, this house ball, is kind of a new animal for us to deal with, and I want to make sure that everybody here understands. So, tell us about what the opening procedure was for if I was a casual bowler that was using a house ball, and what the procedure is today now that you've relaxed it, because I think it's important all of us understand what that is. Okay.
Well, again, this was a Stars and Strikes decision. I have a picture I could share with you guys in a second as well. But basically what we decided to do was that we were going to place all of our house balls on the ball return. Our government requirements were the guests could not self-serve a house ball. So in essence, the ball racks that we've had forever had to be emptied. So what we decided to do was we put one of each weight on a pair of lanes. Since we're only issuing one of those lanes, this worked out. So in our sense, we did sizes 7 through 15, and we put the odd weights on the odd lane, the even weights on the even lane, and we had 9 house balls on that rack. The reason we chose 9 is our rolling ball rack that we had purchased would only hold 9. And in essence, to get all those house balls off there, clean them and put them back, we couldn't have more than that. So basically our job there was 9 house balls on the rack on the bowling ball return. We covered it with I'll share the screen here if that's all right, Bart.
Absolutely.
All right, 1 second. See if it'll let me behave. There we go. So, oops, wrong picture. So when we first opened up, this is what we still actually do. Can you see that picture? I just want to confirm it's showing properly for you.
Yep.
Okay, so that's 9 house balls on the ball rack, sorted by weight, odd weights on the odd lane, even weights on the even lane, and we would cover those with a plastic tablecloth like you use for birthday parties. And some would say that's a little bit much, that's excessive, but I just want to emphasize, in our opinion, the optic of this resonated so well. When those guests came in for the first time and they see something different, because what we knew was that rental shoes and house balls were the 2 key components that are triggering people's concerns because of the sharing. When we showed them this, and this is what our plan was, that when they would come and we'd issue this lane, we would have somebody down there that would uncover those and let the guests know these house balls were cleaned and sanitized for just your pair. There's 1 of each weight here. We think it will satisfy you, but if you need something else, a different hole size or a different weight, please let us know. We opted not to put the 6s out here because of the bigger kids destroying them. So we would bring those on request, as well as the dinosaur ramps or the ramps that any of the small kids would use. But part of our process of checking in a lane would be for the bowling counter team member to notice if there's a young kid in the crowd, inquire if they need a 6-pound ball or a ramp, and then we'd preempt that by having it at the lane. So that's one of the steps that we would use for the house ball. So every one of these in between the uses, we cleaned every finger hole. We got a glass brush, cleaned every single finger hole. There's 27, and every single one of those, we picked up every house ball and we put it on we wiped it off. We put it on a rolling ball rack, and then we sanitized the hood, the rack, the tray, everything about that ball return. Then we brought the house balls back, sanitized the outside of them, placed them back in this order, and covered them. And then we moved into the bowlers area for our next cleaning process. So for us, that was the decision we made. This is kind of what the bowling area would look like. So when we were done, we'd put the sign up, and we felt like communication we couldn't have too much communication to the guest out there. You know, we didn't want them to come in. There were some that didn't quite know what we were going to do differently. But as you walk to this lane, this is what you see. Their sign that says it's been sanitized. We pick it up when they come in. The sign on the left you see is basically telling them this lane won't be used today due to social distancing. There's a sign that's perpendicular that's telling them leave all their items here, leave your rental shoes and any food and beverage containers here, and we'll take care of it. But as they come in, the optic of this is such a different presence to the guests, especially in this environment, that I will tell you candidly that I worked in these stores. And when I stood there and watched the mom with the kid come up, or the groups coming in, there were some that didn't care. The first guest I had one of the stores was a 75-year-old senior league bowler, not wearing a mask or anything, wondering when his league was starting back up, which totally surprised me. But you could tell some people come in kind of wide-eyed and a little cautious. They're tapping their toe in the pond here. They're not sure what's going on. So our biggest 2 words that we used were optics and consumer confidence. And by doing these optics that they see, we would gain the consumer confidence in order to get them to come back and hopefully to bring their friends and tell more people.
Yeah, I hope all of you were able to see those pictures, and I saw even a few of you snapping pictures with your phone, which is awesome. Robert said 2 words that are critical, and I just want to emphasize them again because I'm hearing this around the country, and I'm actually watching it as a follower of Robert and other brands, and that is optics and confidence. I'm of the belief that our industry, all of you, have been working hard, cleaning and sanitizing and providing a great experience far before we ever had any COVID to worry about, right? None of your places were dirty and had viruses and germs. But what we did was we did that out of the view of the guest. We didn't do it in front of them. And so what Robert showed you there was probably nothing that you weren't already doing, minus the overkill and the tablecloth and the signs. But it is a lot about optics, and it's about building confidence. And the reason I mention that is I follow Robert's brand on social media just as I follow many of your brands. We're all learning. It's how I learn. Sometimes I learn what I don't want to do by following, not any of you, but others. And oftentimes I learn what I do want to do. And I followed Robert's brand. And I know that, Robert, your team put a big emphasis on posting positive reviews from guests when they came to see you. And they had those optics, they had that confidence, and I could see those. So tell us a little bit about that strategy and how did you execute it at the center level, and why was it so important?
Well, again, I think the reality of our world, and for those who have been in their house since March, they just don't know what they're walking into. And I could see, I see commercials every day where everybody talks about, come on in, we've got social distancing, come on in, we've got this or that. But the reality is, are they going to come in to see that? Are they going to buy into what you're selling if everybody's saying it? So what we felt was it was better word of mouth, that somebody who came in, a mom with kids that came in and is having a great time and has clearly said to us, wow, you guys are really making me feel better. And I've had multiple folks come to me and they would really just, it would be amazing. They would just say, hey, you know what? Thank you. Thank you guys for taking this seriously. Thank you for making us feel safe. I'm going to tell all my friends. And I would ask them, we would solicit, hey guys, if you don't mind, if you're into social media, we would appreciate a mention, tag us so that the other folks will see that as well. It's basically, the reality is that you may listen to somebody on social media more than you will that commercial on TV. And especially if you happen to know them and you're in their social group and you trust that person, then we've had some people that did come to us and say, look, hey, I saw that post the other day. I just wanted to come see for myself. We had actually people walking in the door, just looking around and leaving. And when we would inquire, hey, would you like to bowl? Or no, I just wanted to come see what you guys were doing. I mean, that was the greatest compliment we could ask for. And I will be candidly honest that we had 100% positive comments. Every comment that we had, it was positive. The only negative comment we had recently was somebody complaining that we were going to open one of our stores in another state, but that's going to happen. I don't care who you are. But, you know, for us, the reality of that is we wanted to make sure that social media was utilized, not only to get the word out, because if you get the word out, then you get some consumer confidence. You get them in the building, they see it with their own eyes, they see the optics of what you're doing, and they tell their friends. And it becomes real then. It's not just somebody's opinion. It's, hey, I saw it, but now I've seen it, and it's true. You should go check them out.
Yeah, and I can tell all of you on the call today that while I'm not in Robert's market, I do follow the brand. And as a parent, reading those posts that they were reposting from moms and couples and families gave me a confidence level that had I been in that market, had I been looking for something to do without reservation, not even knowing Robert and knowing the brand, I would have felt comfortable going there. So my takeaway for all of you on that is it's okay to ask for the review. It's okay to ask for positive feedback. And then once you get that, whether you're a 6-lane center in a small town in the awesome state of Pennsylvania, or you're a large a center somewhere in Denver, Colorado, you got to have somebody on your team, a family member, a staff member that then is reposting that, sharing that, letting people know that, hey, we're safe, we're secure, we're sanitized, we're ready to roll. So I would encourage all of you, not only Robert's brand, but other brands, follow them and see what they're doing and replicate that. That's just good business. So I'm going to launch one more poll question here while we got folks here, give Robert a chance to catch his breath. So we talked about the house balls, but so for all of you that are getting ready to reopen, you know, what do you think is going to be the biggest pain point that you have in managing this? What's keeping you up at night? You know, is it social distancing? Is it staffing? Is it securing the supplies? Take a second and vote there. And then Tiffany Rains from Maryland joined us. Hi, Tiffany. Tiffany typed in a question. Great to see you. And I would encourage you, if you have any questions about opening, you can type those in. I've got just a couple more for Robert here, and then we're going to switch to leagues. But Tiffany brought up a great question, Robert, why we're voting, and that is, when you reopen, did you use online reservations only, or did you allow walk-ins?
We did both, actually. What we had done is we went into our reservation system, created a every other lane reservation to block off for the social distancing aspect, but we did not strictly go one or the other. We wanted to open up the reserved business initially, or as quickly as we could. In candor, our business for that was very low for the first few weeks. Our birthday parties were, in the entire chain, we had 8 for the foreseeable future. The good news is that has ramped up over the last few weeks. We've gotten 30%. Last week, we had 30% of the birthday parties booked for the week that we had the prior year. And 30% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're at basically 1 and you get to 30, absolutely. The reserve lanes for coming in and open bowling have increased magnificently. We're very pleased with that growth. Although it's definitely not where it was, at least we've got people thinking about it and wanting to come in. So we didn't shut either one off. I know some folks went cashless, some required reservations. To be honest, it's the great unknown in your market. I would say what our decision was is we're going to leave both open, but we're going to limit what we allow so that we would have lanes for a walk-in guest. We wouldn't sell all out online because you're going to have people coming in to test the water and see what this is all about. But if I have somebody that wants to make a reservation, I want them to be able to do that as well. And we charge a premium for that. We charge a $15 reservation fee. And right now, I will tell you, cash is king, revenue is king, and you guys know that, because if you're closed, you've got zero. So getting that revenue ramped up in any way possible is one of the highest priorities, I would say, is out there, just from our perspective.
Good. So a couple other questions on the opening that popped in here. Leif from Florida is joining us. And Robert, I'm going to edit his question a little because we're going to save the league part about when we have our league discussion, because you and I have talked about this. So Leif, I hope you don't mind, but he says, are you still operating every other lane? And I'd like you to answer that question as it relates to casual play. Are you, for open play, casual play, are you still operating every other lane?
The answer is yes and no. In the state of Georgia, one of the rules is that you may have up to 6 people on a lane or 10 people in a group, now 25 in a group. So our plan, or the way we operated initially, it is every other lane. But if there was more than 6, then we would give them a pair, but there could be no more than 10 on that pair. And then we would have the buffer lane as the next one over. So for example, if a group of 10 came in, we'd put them on 1 and 2, lane 3 would not be used, and we would continue down the house in that form. We'll get to the league piece later, but that's how we did that. Birthday parties the same way. We did a max of 10 because that was the regulation at the time. And so if mom was hosting a birthday party, those 10 folks could be in a pair of lanes, but we would have the buffer lane or the non-used lane as the next one, either on either side of them or around them on one side if we had them against the wall.
Okay. And actually, you led into Marcel from Connecticut joining us, and he had a question about, I think you partially answered, that was, are you doing anything differently for the birthday parties? And so if 8 children were together as a party, you treated them as a group and you put them on a pair together.
Correct. Our decision was that our terminology is they came in as a group, whether they lived in the same house, we didn't know, and frankly, we didn't care. They were a group, they booked as a group, we treated them as a group, and we just used that as our baseline to execute their party. And if somehow we get groups, which we did, we got groups of 30 that would walk in the door. It's not like 20 of you guys have to leave because only 10 of you can bowl. No, heck no. We would put 10 in a group, skip a lane or a pair, 10 in a group, and just divide them out in groups of 10 in order to not fall outside the guidelines we were given at the time. Now it's 25. So we've opened our birthday parties up to a maximum of 25. So our plan at this stage is 4 lanes that can hold those 24 or 25 kids, and then there'll be that same buffer lane on the edges of them wherever they land in the building.
Good, thank you. So I'm going to launch one more poll because I have one more question before we jump to leagues there, and I'm going to ask the group here first. I'm going to launch this next poll. This is just kind of your guess here, gang, that when you do open, or even if you're open, what % of revenue do you anticipate running compared to prior year during your first 30 days? Got a couple options there. So what do you think the revenue is going to be as you're coming in there? And this will be interesting because the question I'm going to ask Robert here is, Robert, without citing any numbers, want to be respectful of that, can you share with us on a percentage basis how revenues have been compared to prior year in total? Where did they start and where are they currently?
you want me to skew your poll, or do you want to wait till that's done?
No. I mean, if they're gonna cheat to win, I'm okay with that.
All right, that's good. Our first week, to be honest, we were disappointed. We ran about 19.5% of prior year, which frankly was a little disconcerting because our goal or our forecast when we established this was that we would be at 30% of prior year in the month of May in terms of total revenue. Since that time, we've continuously ramped up week over week. We've actually opened new stores. So what's interesting is we'll have the Atlanta stores or the Georgia stores are in a different week number than our Alabama store, which just opened last week. So their ramping up is a little bit different on that scale. But as a total, currently we are right at 50% of prior year's results, which is ahead of our schedule. We initially anticipated not getting that till later this year. So we're pleasantly surprised. Our focus is to try and just drive that revenue whenever we can. We are actually hitting capacity on waiting lists on the weekends. So now we're evaluating, what are we going to do with pricing and or our specials that we're offering. The Kids Bowl free, we are offering that. We made a decision we would offer that for the simple fact, again, of consumer confidence and getting mom out there to test the water and tell her friends. Giving away a free game in this environment, we didn't feel was a high risk. But I will tell you, yesterday, we do a $1.29 special on Wednesday, and we were packed. It was raining. We were on a waiting list most of the day in a lot of our locations. And I know a lot of you that aren't open would kill for just any guest, much less a waiting list. But it didn't happen overnight. It takes a little build up each week. It got a little higher. And we've got some locations in the 70% range, and we've got some that are hovering in the mid-30s. But as a total company average, we're right at 50%.
No, that's great. And I could share, just layer on that because I have the benefit of sharing with some other states that are open. Texas is going on week 3. Oklahoma's been open for a few weeks. There are some others out there. I can tell you, just to kind of manage expectations, most everyone I've spoken to is in that 20 to 30% range in week 1 and week 2. Nobody is very few people are coming in at over 30% on week 1 or 2 as you ramp up. As all the things Robert's been talking about, the guests are coming in and trying to kind of figure out how this thing shakes out. The team is trying to figure out how to operate. We're in a customer service business, and many of us are wearing, gloves and a mask, so it's a different environment we're operating in. The good news is every week gets a little better as the staff gets better, the guest becomes more comfortable. And I was starting to hear numbers this weekend from Texas that they were starting to get in the 70% range, 70 to 75%, and feeling pretty good about that. And really, they were similar to Robert, that when you start to get between that 50 and 75%, depending on your business model, you are at capacity with lanes when you get into, having to leave half of your lanes vacant, or 40% of your lanes vacant with some type of a social distancing. Well, that's the next hurdle that we have to go over there. So as you're opening back up, we just want to manage the expectations on there. The great news is we are seeing it universally, whether you're, again, a 6-lane center in a small farm town or a larger entertainment center, wherever you start at, it is getting better every week, on there. And Robert, I have one quick question I'm going to throw in there. We're going to shift gears there because I can't say no to Georgia. She asked a question. As it relates to group, you're not doing any group events with there's no buffets allowed virtually anywhere in the country, but are you doing any group events with food, or everything's just booked business for bowling?
We're doing group events also. We're getting inquiries for that every day now. Believe it or not, there are some companies that are looking down the road and wanting to talk about doing something for their team because they're coming out of the same thing we all are. And basically, if we had booked them before as a buffet, basically the way we've chosen to handle that is we're going to plate that food in the kitchen and bring it out as a plated dinner in the groups that we're allowed to have, which are no more than 25. So if the company is bigger than that, we will manage them throughout the building and have 25 here in the arcade, 25 in the party room, 25 bowling here and there. So we'll have to spread out the bigger groups, but we definitely are starting to get inquiries for that. Daycares are starting to come in, which doesn't surprise me, but does surprise me at the same time. But we are getting daycares to come back in, the birthday party business, and the corporate business is starting to talk to us. Is it where we want it? No, but at least they're talking to us.
Well, that's amazing. That's a great news. That's the first time I've heard of any groups having any conversations about coming back. I've heard a little bit about the birthday parties and the daycares. As mom and dad go back to work, it almost forces that daycare business to start to come back there. So, last question for the group here, and then we're going to let Robert talk about our topic that I know we want to talk about here, and that's this thing called leagues. So, what I want to know is, what's your position on leagues here for our attendees? Are you planning on flooring any summer leagues? Just a yes or no. Yeah, I need bowlers ASAP, or no, I'm going to kind of wait there. So, Robert, let's shift gears, talk about leagues. Want to be sensitive to your time there. Around the
No
country, it's that league guest, even if they're coming in casually, that's been the most loyal and the first to return.
Mhm.
Just so people know, I know that you have some entertainment type centers, but for those that don't know, you do league business in all your places. What role do leagues play in your current business model?
Well, in the current business model, they're extremely important, more so than they've been in the past. Being candid, there in the entertainment segment of the bowling entertainment centers, they're less than about 10% of the business. So they get attention, but they don't get the attention a traditional store would give them, because that is their lifeblood. We made a decision during our shutdown time, because we started asking the same question. Should I even try to get a summer league? I mean, is this thing even going to be open, first of all? And if it is, will anybody come? So what our plan and our strategy was, that we actually started contacting every league bowler about 3 or 4 weeks before we thought we were going to open. Like, we were just contacting them through the summer. One, for two reasons. One, we were calling the fall leagues to see if they were going to come back and plan to restart again where their season ended, because at that time there were some that were still deciding. So we were reaching out to those. And then the natural question is, well, are you guys going to do summer leagues? Well, frankly, we were like, we have no idea, because we don't know if we'll be open. But the decision we made was, let's go ahead and plan to do summer leagues, even if we have to change the dates. But let's target early June. So we'll go ahead and get our collateral put together. We'll put it on the website. We'll reach out to the folks that bowled last year and invite them in and let them know we're planning to open. If we don't open, we'll push these dates back. But you got to get them thinking about coming in, because right now they just don't even know to even think that. So we reached out to them. Then we created our flyers and our schedules. We communicated those via email. We put them on social media. We text them out for people that had texting. So the summer league decision was made early, because it takes a few weeks to get that promotion out there. If I handed you a flyer today and start a league next week, we probably won't get many people. So we wanted to have some build up. So we made a decision early on that we were going to floor our summer leagues, and we were going to try and focus on that, because that's the annuity that we needed, that we knew was going to come in, because we sure didn't know if anybody else was going to come in. And to our surprise, last week we floored our first summer leagues in our company, and we had a 41% return rate from last summer, which, again, if I told my boss back in the day that I lost 59% of the leagues, I would be out of a job. Right now, my boss is extremely happy that we found 41% of them, and actually are going to grow that number this week as we floor more leagues and fill in some of those teams. So surprisingly, they are willing to come in. But I will tell you, as we get into some further discussion, some of them have a different view of how we're doing it. And the traditional folks are having a little adjustment period. Let's just say it that way.
So let's talk about that. Let's get right to the elephant in the room here, because I think, universally, as responsible operators, I think we most can say, hey, okay, I'll get into this social distancing thing when it comes to casual folks that don't know each other, and I'll leave a lane here and a lane there, and I'll do the right thing. But how are you handling social distancing for leagues? That's the $60 question.
Okay. Well, again, I have an optic I'll share with you guys. So if you'll bear with me 1 second, let me get to it.
That's why
so
we're
we made a
money.
decision. Yes, absolutely. Before I get into what you're seeing on the screen, basically we had that same dilemma. All we did when we started promoting these is we said we're going to promote socially distancing responsible leagues. That's how we promoted it, because we didn't even know what that looked like at the time. And so we started to think through, how do we do this? And so what I have on the screen here is one of our locations. It's a 36-lane facility. What we have as VIP, I don't know what you might call yours, but curtains in between the pairs. It's usually cosmic. It's usually not a league forum, to be candid, but it's the upgrade area within your facility. So if you had a 12-team league, what would it look like? So in this example, what we did is we put one team on a pair, but put the second team on the pair right beside them. So what we have in social distancing here is every team sits at the odd table. In this case, there's 2 tables in the bowlers area. Or if you have a lane with couches, every team sits on the odd lane seating, whatever that is, couch, table, or whatever, that's 6 feet apart, and that puts them all the way down the road. And again, this is our decision, maybe not what you guys are allowed to do or what you feel like is right for you. I'm just sharing with you what we decided. So this was our initial plan, is to put them side by side by side, but you can see how that eats up your real estate, and you're giving up 24 lanes, and the only thing left is 6 open play lanes. And we need to have that opportunity for revenue on all accounts. So plan B was let's do it in pairs, and we can put teams 1 and 2 on the same pair, but team 1 sits on lane 1. And again, it's the same exact seating I just told you, except team 2 sits on lane 3, couch or table. And then they socially distance themselves as they take turns to bowl. This seems to be the preferred method for your traditional bowler, because the competitive nature of seeing the game scores, how you're matching up to the team you're bowling, does resonate with them. Where in this upper example, I'm bowling, I'm in and out of there in an hour, hour and a half in a typical league forum. So they're fast. The good news for that is you get your lanes back quicker and can have some business behind them. The bad news is you've got to clean all these lanes before you can put the business down there, and it puts some additional pressure on your team. So again, with this layout, although not much better, you do gain 1 extra open play lane. So our initial thought was, okay, let's let the leagues decide, let them take a vote. Then we decided, no, we're going to make some decisions. Another area that you could do is you could put them all on the first 12 lanes if you have dividers. And I have a picture of that. Our good friend in Colorado, Don McBrain, their location decided to purchase these plastic dividers, which you may have seen in some other areas of the country with their social media posts. But these kind of divide the pairs similar to what a curtain would in VIP. And so the reality is that you can consider, what we decided is the league is a group. You guys are a group, whether there's 12 teams in your group or 12 teams of 4 in your group, it didn't matter to us. You're a group. You just decide you're playing somebody else differently. In the state of Georgia, this is one of the things that was interesting. I can put that curtain up in VIP, the curtain in between the pairs. I can put 2 teams a league in there, pull the curtain, and that counts as a dividing wall. And so thus not needing to kill the lane in between them. So now I can actually put this 12-team league in our VIP area with the curtains drawn the entire time, and they socially distance themselves within that bowler's area. So one team sits on lane 1 seating, the other one kind of back at the concourse on the high tables or stands around. But they're in charge of socially distancing themselves. But with this decision, now I've got 12 open play lanes that I can sell and make additional revenue on, which again, as you're in the revamping period and the ramping up period, having 12 lanes versus having 6 is a big difference. And again, cash is king and revenue is king. So our decision initially was to lay it out this way, the very top one. But we did have a league meeting last week with one of the leagues that was not happy with that initial layout, and they went to the one on number 2 here. What we did do in the other ones is we actually, where we can, we're using the VIP. We're just basically pulling the curtains, socially distancing them, and allowing ourselves to have other lanes to sell to our casual guests. So as a company decision, when we start a house league or we've started any summer league, we basically told them this is the way we're doing it. If they wrapped around, if there's more than 12 teams, they come back over here. And again, the same rules apply that would have applied before. The 2 teams can bowl each other, but the other one would sit on the opposite lane, and we would just back into it. Because we do have some leagues that are teams that are leagues, that have 16 teams in this particular facility. So part of that spills back over into the twilight section, and we have to socially distance them as we did here in this example number 2 right here. So hopefully that answered the question. I'm going to leave it up there though, Bart, in case you have some questions or somebody's asking you a question about anything specific.
Yeah, that's a money slide there, folks. I hope everybody got a peek at that, because that is some incredible options. Again, understanding that there are 15 different states represented on this call, and you may in fact have some local ordinances or some state requirements that may or may not preclude you from doing something like this, but you're getting a look at some different options to go with there. So, Robert, my question is the mindset, and I don't want to just assume this is the case, but is the mindset of the league guest as it relates to social distancing different than the casual guest?
I'd say absolutely. And when they come into practice in a location, they're just hanging out, man. They're like, you don't need to do that. Like, they tell us, you don't need to clean that. We don't care. And our perspective on it was pretty simple from the start. We're doing it for every single guest, whether you're a league guest, whether you're a casual guest, whether you've been here 100 times or this is your first, because the person sitting at that pair next to you sees us not doing it for them because they're cool with it. Now you've lost all of your credibility, and your consumer confidence is going to take a hit. So we stood firm and we said, look, we are going to do the same thing for every guest every time. So if you're there, you get the same treatment. We're going to clean your lane. We're going to clean those house balls. When the league guests come in, that's one pain that does come up. I have an 8-ball bag from Joey, who's the best average bowler in your house, and you've got all those 9 house balls sitting in his way on the pair you just gave him. So one of our learnings was that we pick 2 or 3 pairs that we take the house balls off. We don't even have them out there unless we have to take them back out. And when a guest comes in with that roller bag, you assign them to those lanes, so you don't have to go down there, take the house balls off, bring them back later, clean them again, and recover it. So there are a couple of house ball returns that are just blank, and those are for the people that want to do a cross lane or your league bowlers that come into practice. But definitely, it was interesting though. I'll share with you. I went to a league startup Thursday, and we did the VIP scenario where we put them all in VIP. I had a guest coming up who was wearing a mask, bowling in the league, and questioning me on the social distancing aspect. How are you allowing this to happen? How is this social distancing? And when you explain it to them that the curtain is a allowed barrier between groups, and I can keep groups of 10 together. In this case, now we can go to 25, but 10, there's less than 10 in that bowler's area. And we announced that they have to police themselves. If we see something egregious, we'll address it, or if somebody complains, we'll address it. But in general, we just ask them to please socially distance amongst themselves. We don't want to police every league, every person. And for the most part, people are doing that anyway. If you've been outside at all, you're almost instinctive. If you see a dot on the floor, you're standing on it. If there's a dot in front of that and somebody's standing on it, you know what you're supposed to be doing. So anybody that's kind of getting in that space, I don't know their logic for doing it, but the mindset of the league bowler is a little more casual than those of a mom with some kids now bowling next to a lane where there's some people she doesn't know. You can sense there's definitely a different mindset on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, the 41% of the guests that came back to see you this summer, they obviously have some level of comfort with you, some level of comfort with socializing, some desire to socialize, or they would have been part of the folks that just said, hey, I'm going to wait this thing out.
100%. And a lot of them called asking, like, are you going to do this? And the reason we did the summer league back in the day, and Bart remembers this from our Brunswick world, a good summer leads to a good fall. We used to preach that all the time for our leagues. And we felt like if we can have a halfway decent summer, we've got a chance at getting a decent fall, because now those folks are in the door. Here's that consumer confidence thing again, where they've come in, they see what we're doing with the league, they see how we're socially distancing, they see how we're cleaning, they know that they can come back. We've had some that say, look, I want to bowl this summer. I'm missing it bad, but I just can't bowl in the summer. I'll be back in the fall. So the direction of our team is to have that fall league schedule out to me today. It probably should already be out if I had everything in order, but the reality is the sooner we can get them committed for fall, the better we're going to be, not only for them sharing the word with their teammates to get them to come in and try us if they haven't, but for us to have that guaranteed business in a time where we're going to be ramping up. And hopefully by then, the social distancing things will have minimized a little bit, and we won't have as much pressure on that, and we might be able to do the side-by-side bowling like we have traditionally in the past.
Good. So a couple of questions came up here, Robert. That's awesome insight, and thank you. That's I hope all of you are. I'm learning things and taking notes, and I'm not even starting leagues for the summer here. Um, there's been a lot of questions about the masks, right? In some areas of the
Hmm.
country, masks are required. Some areas they're strongly suggested. Some
Hmm.
areas are used to wash the car. I mean, it just depends where you're located. Give us a little feel from a guest perspective, the league bowlers. Um, were there any areas you operated centers that were required? And then of those that weren't required, any rough percentages on what you saw as far as who was wearing a mask?
Sure. Well, first of all, we as the operators are required. So we all wear masks. If we're on duty, we wear masks. Gloves are required in certain positions. There's others like the mechanic or whatever that is not. But in general, that's us as the operator. The guest, it's optional in all of our markets currently, so there's not required to wear it. If it was mandatory, fine. I mean, we would handle that as it was needed, and clearly we would have to enforce that. And we've all seen the YouTube videos of those folks that aren't happy about having to do that. But the bottom line for us is that it's optional. Initially, we saw more masks than I'm seeing now. Frankly, they kind of look at me like, why are you still wearing that thing? We're required to, and it's suggested by the governor. But for us, I see less and less. I do see them on our senior guests that do come in, but in general, the moms, the kids, a few intermittent guests, but frankly, not near what you would have thought in this world that we're in right now. Many people are done with that.
Good. Good. Well, that was a question that came in there. Yeah, I mean, I hate, generalizing, and it sounds like this kind of reinforces your what you've been sharing with us, that, we've been kind of sharing with folks as we've been visiting that, and it may not be exactly a third, but if you take the consumer in all of our markets, there's a third, a third, and a third, and whether that third is 20%, you pick the number, but there's a third that they are just pent up and they're ready to get back and they're ready to live life. Not saying that they're right or wrong. They're the folks that are, first in line, ready to come see you. They don't, not concerned about a mask, not concerned. They'll be respectful, but they're not concerned. And then there's the third on the other end that they're not coming out of their house until there's a vaccine. And it's not things wrong. They may have a family situation or somebody that's at risk, but they've made that decision. And I know people like that. They're wonderful people. They're dear friends. But even in Texas, where we've been able to go out and eat for 3 weeks, they've said, I haven't been out of my house. I'm not leaving until there's a vaccine. And I respect that. But those folks, that third of the business is probably not going to come see us anytime soon. So there's a vaccine. What we need to do, and all the things that you're doing that are going to serve you well, and all the folks here that are listening and following suit, is this middle third that is waiting to see which direction they should go. Should they follow the people that have went out and started to live, and it's safe and it's okay to socialize, or should they in fact be here and hunker down until there's a vaccine, because the people that say you shouldn't go anywhere until vaccine are right? And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that in the business volume and the percentage, that all of the things that you're doing and all of the things that operators like you are doing are getting that second third to migrate over here. And the faster you get them to migrate over, the quicker you're going to get to that 70, 75, 80% of your business. And that's kind of really kind of what I hear you telling us.
Mm-hmm. I make it a point to ask the guests as they come in, is this your first time back since we've reopened? And I'm still surprised at the number that say yes. And some that say, hey, I've been here 3 times already. We love it. So those are wonderful as well.
Yeah. League question came up here. How have you seen, how do the leagues handle the warm-up practice? As a league bowler myself, typically that's kind of where you crowd together. You want to, if you're old like me, you got to loosen up and throw as many practice shots as you can. Has the practice experience been any different on your leagues you've started?
In watching, and I'll be honest, I haven't watched many because I'm not bowling this summer myself, but the reality is the traditional bowlers are going to do what traditional bowlers do. And the one I did see, they were standing there like they normally would. Some would wait back at a table and then walk up. Others would stand there and converse, because in the example that I was telling you, is they were bowling with their own team initially in one of those. So it was just their team. But they're a group, and I think they see themselves as a group. and they practice as a group and they're going to bowl as a group, we just ask them to socially distance. There's no police coming in at this point in any of our locations, and I hope they're not, but we don't see that abused that often. And if it's brought up, we definitely address it. But what I have noticed at the time, and limited, honestly, is that they kind of fall to old habits. And that's the challenge of operating in this environment, is our teams fall to old habits too of how they used to do things, and we've got to change that. But some of our bowlers are very conscious of that. You can tell they're trying to socially distance, and if somebody gets in their way, they kind of back up a little further. There's others that just plain out don't care, or don't acknowledge it, or just do what they've always done.
Yeah, good. And I know we've got a couple of smaller centers with us. I know we have some 8 and 12 lane centers. And, you know, kind of my takeaway, if I'm in your shoes, is I'm hearing Robert about, you know, treating that league as a group, and that it's almost like a closed session. If you're fortunate enough to have an 8 or 12 team league without any casual guests coming in, then you almost are treating that as a private group that you're asking them to responsibly social distance, that they can, if they're comfortable, they can just, it's almost like business is normal for them. And they can do their thing. Awesome. Let me see. I just want to make sure I don't have anything else. We probably got another couple of minutes here. We've kept Robert over, but it was great information there. Robert, the question I always like to ask smart guys like yourself is, because you're humble and you run a much better operation than you give yourself credit for, and that's what makes you so good. If you had it to do over again, is there something you'd say, man, I wish we would have done that? You know, and whatever the business is, whatever the, you know, whatever facet of the business, not necessarily lead. You just said, now that I know, my next pandemic, I'll be ready, right? This is what I'm.
Well, I don't know that there's any one specific thing. I think what we've learned along the way is some things that we prepared for, or it was the great unknown. And I think that's probably where a lot of you might be on this call, is that you haven't opened up yet. You don't know what's going to happen. That great unknown is looming out there. And we had built it up to be such a big thing that it didn't end up being in a lot of cases. Like the arcade piece of it, you know, if I had it to do over again, I'd have never shut off half those swipers. I'd have had those signs up, and we would have managed the social distancing of the groups playing those rider games. Because there were times in the early stages where mom wanted to play with the kid, but we didn't let them, because it was the guideline of every other swiper or every other game. And looking at it now, our guidelines have changed some. So we were able to adapt that to ours. So I think that we were more tense than we probably needed to be as an operator. We didn't want to mess up. We didn't want to, you know, first put a black eye on our brand, but the black eye of the industry as a whole, because, you know, we were the butt of many jokes and late night monologues there for a bit in Georgia for bowling getting to open up in Georgia. But, you know, we took it very seriously. And, you know, we're in a relaxed, hospitable business. We're in hospitality. People come to us to have fun. And so we've got to balance that with our guests. They're going to come in hoping to have the same great time they had before, but that great time looks a little different right now. So if I had to do it over again, I don't know that I would change much that we've done other than the adaptation to the guidelines that we've been given. But I would have maybe not put so much pressure on ourselves to do the things that we did do. But I felt like it was the right thing to do at the time, with the environment that we were in and being the first ones out there testing our foot in this water. But overall, I hope there's not another pandemic, because I don't want to deal with this again. I'm ready to get back to business as we know it, and the industry as we've loved.
Yeah, well, Robert, I've been very fortunate, blessed. I've known Robert for 40 years now, and I've been in this business 40 years. And I told him I've got a library of manuals, and I'm a bit of a hoarder when it comes to history and bowling and operations. And I've got 40 years worth of manuals and marketing, and I can solve it. I looked through 40 years worth of stuff. Nowhere in there was there a pandemic manual. I got every other manual for every pin setter, every marketing thing. There's no pandemic manual. So, Robert, no brand is perfect, and we all are always striving to do better. But I'll tell you, your team has done a fantastic job in, being the tip of the spear in Georgia, navigating this. And while the folks on the meeting today may not realize it, you folks certainly helped pave the way for all of these folks, all of us. And I'm hoping that today was some time well spent for this group, that all of you on our meeting today got some takeaways that you can go back and think about. To Robert's point, what he shared may not be exactly right for you, but it's just like where two or more gather, you can tweak it, make it your own, whether you're an 8-lane center or a 48-lane center, and do that. Kurt sent a note and said, hey, is this going to be available, a video that I can share with the team? And Kurt, the answer is yes, we are recording this. We'll actually make it available to some folks that couldn't be with us. And if there's some parts that you want to share with your team, or go back and take a look at, because there were a lot of great nuggets in there from Robert there. So either Chad, Myron, Chris, or myself will be distributing that to all of our managed states, and make sure that you have access to that. And there's no reason we can't get that out to you tomorrow there. So look for an email that give you a link to download the recorded version of this. Robert, we can't thank you enough, brother, for taking some time out of your busy schedule. I know you're busy, 16 places to worry about, some that are at it on week 4, some that are at it on week 1, and some are just like these folks here. They are praying for the day that they get their chance to open up too.
If I can say one last thing to the guys on there, guys, keep your faith. It's going to come up. You'll get open soon. I know it's tough right now, and I can't speak to each of you because I know that every situation's different. But the reality is that you will be back. You'll be back better than ever. I think somebody used a quote from a church service that they had been to. We're better for it. At the end of the day, we'll be better for it. Now, what that means in your world, I don't know, but that's the way we choose to look at it. We're going to be a better for it operation. Looking at ourselves internally, reinventing ourselves in some ways that we wanted to, but couldn't. So this unfortunate situation has provided us an opportunity to evaluate operating hours, to evaluate staffing, to really evaluate some areas that we were kind of caught in the rut of. And now we've got a chance to reinvent ourselves as to what we really think we need to be. And I would encourage you guys to internally look at yourselves and say, where can I get better? Where can this be better for us as a company or as a location, to our guests and to our team members, to just be a better operation? I think everybody will be better for it in the long run. Hopefully everybody survives and we get to that point. But thank you guys. Again, I'm not saying that Stars and Strikes has all the answers. I'm not saying I have all the answers. This is our chosen path. I'd be more than happy to talk to any of you individually after this. Bart, if you want to provide them that email address, I am certainly willing to talk to you further if you'd like. But again, I'm not saying I have all the answers. I'm just the guy that has been swimming in the pool a little bit longer than everybody else. So, I've got some insight that may help you, but again, every state's different. Every municipality is different. Every operator has a different vision of what they want to do. But if I can help you in any way, I'm more than willing. And thank you guys for being out there and continuing our bowling industry and our hospitality brand. I think it's a wonderful thing. Look forward to hearing the stories of you guys opening, so I can come ask you what you did, so I can put my book together for the next pandemic that Bart's holding me to.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again, Robert. And thank you all for taking some time. Again, we'll provide Robert's email address. It's very gracious of him to do that. And we will certainly get that recording out to your teams if you'd like to share that as well. So continue to stay safe. Keep your head up. Bowling is back. And Robert's point, we're all going to be better for it. So take care, everybody.